Thank you all very much for thoughtful testimony. As I was sitting here, and I don't know why this didn't occur to me before, but 55 years ago, right now, I was writing my senior thesis in college on nuclear deterrence in the spring of 1966. I'd give anything to be able to find that paper. I would probably be appalled if I read it, but let me begin with several questions. Mr. Roberts, let me follow up on something that you mentioned. What is our doctrine with regard to, say, Russia using a tactical nuclear weapon in Eastern Europe in the context of a invasion of Ukraine or annexation of Poland or some other similar kind of action? In other words, is there a deterrent to the use of a tactical nuclear weapon? Because as you know, Mr. Putin has announced a escalate to de-escalate strategy. I'm wondering how deterrence, as we've been discussing it, fits into that scenario.
Well, let me start the discussion. NATO has, the United States has a policy that says that we reserve the right to respond with nuclear weapons in circumstances where, in extreme circumstances, where the vital interests of the United States or an ally are in jeopardy. We don't describe those circumstances. We don't identify the national interests that we consider vital. We leave it uncertain in a form of calculated ambiguity. It makes it difficult for our adversaries to know exactly where our red line is. And frankly, we may not know exactly where our red line is until a conflict is unfolding and puts certain interests at risk.
So there is a deterrent, but it's ambiguous. Others want to comment on that scenario, because I think that's one of the ones that we have to think about. Mr. Miller?
Yeah, I don't think we have a doctrine for that.
I think that we, exactly as described by Dr. Roberts, have the forces and have made the pledge to defend our allies. And I think the Russians absolutely understand that. And that's why, while they're rampaging in Ukraine and in Georgia and taking Crimea, they threaten NATO, but they haven't done anything to act against it.
Let me ask another question. I think it was mentioned, maybe General Keller, in your remarks. The essence of, or not the essence, but one of the essential qualities of deterrence is credibility. Would you argue that the modernization program that's underway now and its continuation is in itself part of the deterrent strategy in order to show that we're willing to invest in a credible, usable nuclear deterrent?
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman. I think if you go back and look at what makes up deterrence, it's convincing an adversary that they can't achieve their objectives, or they're going to suffer unacceptable consequences if they try, or both. And in order to be credible in creating that view, you have to have capabilities that they see as credible capabilities. This gets back to, in order to prevent the use, you have to be ready to use them, and you have to have the willpower, and that comes through declaratory policy and other things that we do and say.
And they know the condition of our system, they know the age, and not doing this kind of modernization would itself be a signal that would undermine the credibility of the deterrent. Is that correct?
I believe that's true.
Okay. We've been talking about state actors. Technology is advancing apace. What happens, I don't want to posit this as a likely scenario, but it's certainly possible. What happens when a non-state actor gets a hold of a nuclear weapon, who's a suicide bomber? What do they care? Deterrence, mutually assured destruction, has no relevance to them. How do we deal with that threat? Because I think that is a threat that we're going to face, either through technological development in some cell in wherever they are, or through purchasing from a nuclear country that has less scruples about this than others. How do you apply the deterrence theory, or I guess what is the theory to prevent a nuclear attack by a non-state actor? Mr. Bracken?
I think there's a lot that actually can be done, but it isn't in increasing deterrence of that. It's increasing intelligence. This is a real issue with India, Pakistan, clearly. It could be for other countries. I would also say it's one of the huge differences in the current environment compared to the Cold War, where it was the sort of threat you would see in James Bond movies, but that's about all. Today, it is a very real threat because of the security of existing nuclear weapons in Pakistan, in India, and perhaps other places. I think there should be, and there already is starting to be intelligence sharing, technology and such with other countries who face this threat. And those in DOD who are doing this should be commended for taking the initiative there, in my view.
This is a place where we have something in common with our nuclear rivals.
Most of the major powers might not agree about a lot of things, but they do agree that they don't want a nuclear war, number one, and they agree that they don't want a terrorist attack on themselves or one of their allies, because it could drag them in. So there's a real basis for a discussion here, and that's a good thing.
Yes, I agree.